If your business has been feeling stuck or on the brink of breaking down into little pieces lately, what if I told you that that doesn't have anything to do with your effort or your talent or your skills or even your strategy, and everything to do with a misalignment happening behind the scenes? Well, luckily for you, that's exactly what we're going to talk about in today's episode. Welcome to the Storytelling Lab, where filmmaking, brand, and business all collide. My name is Bennett, a filmmaker and an author, and for over 2 decades, I've studied how stories actually work on the screen, inside organizations, and most importantly, out in the real world. So each episode, I host one of the world's greatest storytellers to help break down the art and science of storytelling as a system, not just a skill. That means how stories create connection, how they move people emotionally, and ultimately, how they drive action. So if you want to learn to tell stories that do more than just sound good, but they actually achieve something, then this, dear storyteller, is the show for you. What's up, storytellers? Welcome back to the Storytelling Lab podcast. This is episode 218, and today my guest is Jensen Savage, who's a marketing strategist and the founder of Savage Growth Partners. Get it? Jensen's work is founded on one principle. Growth only happens when everything is aligned, and that is aligned 100% with the contents of my upcoming book called The Chief Storytelling Officer. So I was very excited to dive deeper into this with her. This is what I've been talking a lot about lately. It's what I've been interested in lately, what I've been trying to help you with lately. So this is someone who's been doing this for a long time, and we talk about what happens when there are gaps, especially in the connective pieces of your business. What do I mean by that? I mean where one department is passing something off to the other department. So product is passing it off to marketing and advertising, etc. There are gaps often in those connective tissues. That creates a misalignment. When you have departments and individuals operating in silos, we are not operating under one cohesive story. And that, my friends, is a problem. What you want is marketing, sales, operations, leadership, everybody pulling in the same direction, united under the same story. That's what we're trying to accomplish. That's what we talk about in this episode. We talk about how you can't just muscle your way through it or outwork the problem when you have this misalignment. You have to create a system. That is how you are going to grow when you are unified and, again, operating under one cohesive story. But we also get really deep into the tactics like customer experience and customer journey and the metrics that matter most, and why storytelling is not about messaging and marketing and communications, but rather a whole system. It's about the infrastructure of your business. If you are building a product or a business and you feel like it is harder than it should be, and that every single task is its own mountain to climb, then you would really benefit from understanding how to get everyone on your team aligned. So here's my conversation with Jensen Savage, and I hope that you love it. Jensen, welcome to the Storytelling Lab.
Thank you so much for having me.
I am excited that you are here because you talk about a lot of the things that I talk about actually in my upcoming book, which my podcast audience is probably, hopefully they're not tired of hearing about yet. But to sum that up in a word is alignment.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really excited to dive into your perspective, your background on that, and how we can fix what brands and businesses often get misaligned. But first of all, I want to ask you, your expertise is clear. You're very good at what you do, and that's obvious. But my question is, where are you most fulfilled when working with your clients? What makes you the happiest? Like, what are the things that you like to unlock the most?
That's a great question. I really like just seeing success stories. I think that's something that's always really lit me up about working in marketing and business growth, is that the results are so tangible. You can really see somebody go from A to Z, and seeing transformation in clients that I work with is always the most exciting part of what I do by far.
Yeah, because it's hard, right? Like, it's hard for any of us. So you have an idea and the guts to like go build something and put it out in public in the hopes that you're successful. It's vulnerable. And so I agree with that. Like, I'm rooting for everybody. I want us all to win. So I think that's a lovely way to look at it. And I tend to agree with that. It's really nice just to see someone have success because you know how daggone hard it is.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And it's cool because you see, those business results on one side, you see the numbers, but on the other side, you see how those changes really affect people's confidence and the teams getting all excited. It's that stuff that's really the exciting part, is the human aspect of it.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. Where did you learn the bulk of what you focus on these days? Generally, I will say this: when you track someone's like past and their story, obviously you're taking bits and pieces from all of your experiences, but I generally find there's one area, one role, one time in one's life that is like the most informative for how they view their work or the world and the work that they do in the world. Can you put your finger on what that time was or where that place was that influenced how you see marketing work now?
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. For me, it was working as a marketing director during COVID, actually. So
Interesting.
I worked in the fitness space at the time, and our business was 100% focused on in-person services. And so we
Mm,
had in-person facilities all across the country. And then overnight, we had to close all of them down. And you saw, I think it's something like 20% of fitness businesses go under during this time. You saw big players like Gold's Gym go under. And so it was really scary to go from we're doing great, we're growing, to, okay, now we have to completely change the business model. And so for me, the biggest thing that informed how I approach marketing and business growth now is the fact that during that time, we actually ended up growing. So we completely pivoted our business model. We focused a lot on delivering the same services and that same transformation through an online virtual format, which was obviously a huge change, a big thing to navigate. But we still grew during that time. And a huge part of that was that we really aligned our teams and our efforts between the marketing strategy and the things that we were doing on the marketing front, like putting out ads, to what the salespeople were saying, to what we're actually delivering on the ops side. Getting that streamlined was what really enabled us to grow like crazy. Because, I mean, obviously, as you know, if you have all the marketing pieces in the right place, you can drive a bunch of leads. But if sales is saying something else and then ops is delivering something else or can't handle the leads coming in, it all just falls apart. And so that was the big thing that I saw, is to hit that next level of growth, you really have to align all of those different pieces. And so that's something I brought with me in everything that I've done in the marketing and business growth world since.
Glad I asked that question. And absolutely, like if everybody's telling different stories, the message just gets lost. The word that you like, I was already thinking. I told you that we had alignment too. I was excited about this conversation. The word that you use that I was already going to bring up in the next question is transformation.
Mm-hmm.
So similarly, I work with people and have in the past on when you can clearly identify the story that you are trying to create, then there are multiple ways that you can get to achieve that mission. If you just lock yourself into like and paint yourself into a corner, this is what we do, and not this is the transformation we seek to create, then you can't be that resilient or that malleable, right? You
Mm-hmm.
can't adjust. And so when something, I mean, COVID exposed a lot of those weaknesses and those gaps with businesses and brands and even individuals, because we do this, right? And not here's what here's the transformation that we're trying to create. And when you
Mm-hmm.
understand that, you can do it in a multitude of ways. So that's, when I used to coach people one-on-one, it'd be like finding who you are, the transformation you're trying to create. And then it's like the hub and spoke model, right? You have the hub, which is you or your brand or whatever. And then there's a million different ways you can achieve your mission. And if one of them gets knocked out by COVID or whatever, then you can easily pivot to the next. I mean, that's the goal, at least. The other storytelling brands that I've worked with as clients that do it well did the same thing. They were able to pretty easily pivot where many others fell apart because they had that one story that they were telling, and it didn't really attach itself to that overall transformation. So, when you talk to a business, obviously we're in business to be successful. Many businesses, I argue, and maybe you agree, I don't know, focus so much on the numbers and neglect some of the things that we're probably going to talk about today. So if you ask them what's the transformation that you want to create, I suspect, and I'm generalizing here, that many might just be like, "What do you mean? We're to make money, to grow and scale our business, and hopefully sell it one day." So, how do they really dive deeper into understanding, like, what's the impact you're really trying to have on the world? What is the transformation that you are trying to offer? How do you get to that if you've kind of skirted past that in the early stages of your business, let's say?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question. Yeah. And I think that, if you're running a business and you're thinking, yeah, my goal is to make money and grow the business, that's kind of the tippy top layer of everything else underneath it, which is the root of it. And so you kind of touched on that. And I would say if you're really trying to figure out directionally what the transformation is that you're trying to construct for yourself and your business, you have to think about what your motivations actually are with your life. So if you're thinking, I just want to grow my business, okay, why? Because one person might want to grow their business because they want to be able to reliably support their family. That's a completely different reason to grow your business than somebody who feels the need for external validation and wants to be seen as successful, right? We all have these different motivations internally where maybe the end result is the same, but ultimately the thing that lights us up and the reason that we want that end result is completely different. So I would say kind of dig a little bit deeper into those deepest levels of your desires and what you truly want out of life to try to get to what it is that you, or why you're trying to create that transformation in your business and why it actually matters to you.
Perfectly stated. And folks at home, if you're listening or watching and it feels like a therapy session is developing, that's kind of the point, right? I mean, you gotta get messy. You gotta dig deep and figure these things out. I love the way you handled that. Now, you've already touched on some of the misalignment, some of the gaps that are there in many, I don't want to say typical approaches to business, but they might be. Let's stay there for a little bit longer. What are some of the classic case misalignment in or gaps in alignment that you see? What are the mistakes, if we want to call them that you see over and over again in terms of having that your whole business aligned around the same story?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I would say ultimately, if you were to boil it down, it usually comes down to the handoffs between marketing to sales and then sales to ops. All of those things are interconnected too. It's not just a linear thing like you have a lead come in and it goes to sales and it goes to ops. You're constantly marketing to the same people that are already in your ecosystem, or at least if you're a business that's going to grow substantially, if you're going to actually scale long term, you should be marketing to those same people, selling them. That's how you increase that lifetime value. But all that to say, ultimately it's the links that connect those different pieces. So maybe it's on the technical side. Maybe it's a lead coming in and it's not properly tagged, so the sales team doesn't know where they came from, or we're not capturing the right information to give the sales team context on what campaign did this person come in from. Things as simple as that, to just core messaging alignment of, does the team actually know what the transformation is that we're selling, why people should care about it, how we approach the messaging, whether that's in a sales conversation or whether that's in a conversation asking for a referral, or whether that's top of funnel brand awareness marketing. Everybody in the org has to be aligned on those things, because especially as you grow, those things become increasingly important. I always say you can get to a certain point with broken systems for sure, but then you eventually hit a wall where you have to start looking at those handoffs and how those things interconnect and optimizing them, or else you can never scale past that point.
I have a few things to say, but I want to stick with the systems part of it. You said you can get kind of far with broken systems. It makes me think about, like, I've been a solopreneur for like 20 years, and often I try to just work my way through it, right? Like I would in life, like, just brute force which I have learned in my years as I've become wiser that that's not necessarily the best approach. But I think that myself and other businesses tend to do that too. Like just work through it, just work through it. What I have learned and what I try to emulate from successful businesses, what I try to implement in my own is systems, efficient systems, right? Now I do fully understand that that is the way forward. The same thing I mentioned in my book. I'm a writer as well. Like it doesn't work when I just try to sit down and like pump out, 20 pages. That never works. A system of just a daily, repeatable, consistent system. So how does a business establish that? How do they build an infrastructure that allows them to be efficient, but also gives them this foundation that doesn't break down when the stuff hits the fan, and doesn't rely on brute force, metaphorically or literally, to trudge through those moments?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, I think the first thing you have to do is figure out what it is that actually needs to be done in your business to keep things not only running but growing. So let's say if you're a solopreneur and you're constantly creating new paid ads to bring in new clients for your business. Well, that's something that fuels growth, but it's also something that anybody that's run paid ads knows. It's very time intensive. It requires a lot of thinking. So maybe that's something that you can either put to a system so you can do it quicker and more efficiently, or you can delegate. So I think the second thing is to look at the resources that you have within your business. So whether that's money, whether that's time, or whether that's people that work within your business that have a certain skill set. And so kind of taking inventory of the different levers that you can pull to make those things more efficient. And other thing I found very helpful in my own business, especially because I've also dealt with that kind of brute force, just pushing through, and then you just eventually hit a wall where you're completely burnt out. You're like, yeah, this isn't sustainable at all. But something that I found to be extremely helpful was to audit how much time and energy I'm spending on different things, because you'll very quickly find out that you're probably spending way too much time on things that could easily be delegated and also aren't mission critical for it to be you doing the thing. It might need to be done, but it could be something that you could easily outsource and make way better use of your time. Whereas, you might just be sitting there churning out, social media posts or blog posts or whatever it is, and that could easily be outsourced. So I think kind of just taking inventory of the resources that you can lean on within your business, figuring it out what it is that you need to do, and then ultimately putting it to a process. So a standard operating procedure of either handing that off to a virtual assistant or an employee, or if you can, which most things can be nowadays, automating things. That's another huge thing I'm a proponent of. So yeah, that's kind of my approach to building systems.
I think it's so wise because often businesses tend to, I'm generalizing again, can tend to think that all solutions are the same. And what I love about what you just said is like, look at the resources that you have. Maybe it's time, maybe it's money, maybe it's personnel, et cetera. But like, I feel like we often neglect, having those conversations with ourselves, our internal conversations, and realizing, but what's our way out of this? What is the system that we can quickly build that can, get us the furthest down the road? So I think that that's a really good approach, and also recognizing that how one company does it does not necessarily mean that's how you do it. I want to go back to the gaps in alignment being at the links. Also such a wise observation. And as a man in his early 40s, we'll take it back to the fitness concept. I'm starting to learn how important connective tissue is, Jensen. All of my injuries are at joints or ligaments. Like I still have speed, I still have strength, but I don't warm up. I don't have systems in place, and my knee hurts, my hip hurts, my back hurts.
I'm gonna steal that analogy because that's a good one.
It's so good, and it's so true.
Yes.
So yes, now I'm having to go back, work with physical therapists to implement these systems before I, jump into rigorous physical activity, and it's a real thing. But that really exposes how important those little ligaments and tendons and connective tissues are. And you are illustrating it's the same in business. So I think it's a great metaphor to use. How do we fill those gaps? How do we establish a system here that helps reduce the risks of those handoffs, those links breaking down?
I think the biggest thing you need to do is map out what the process even looks like, from a lead coming in to getting to the point of upsells and referrals. So the system that I always approach business growth through is attraction, conversion, delivery, and multiplication. And so it's kind of more like a cycle and a flywheel, because like I said, you're consistently marketing to people, you're upselling them, you're multiplying the value that they have in your or for your business. And so I think the thing that you need to look at is what those steps even are, because a lot of businesses, even larger businesses, don't really know what that customer journey actually looks like. From a customer coming in, even just as, a lead, to staying with you for years, what does that journey look like? What keeps them coming back too? So I think the first thing you have to do is figure out what that process even looks like. And then you have to do the fun stuff, which is looking at the numbers and seeing statistically where those things are holding you back. Because the things that you feel might be holding you back are usually not the things that actually are. So you might see that your close rate's really low. And so then you're looking at, okay, are we listening to these sales conversations? Is it that the leads that come in really are that poor of quality? Or is it that we have a salesperson that's just not converting at the highest level that they should be? So I would say, yeah, you've got to figure out the process and then look at the metrics and tell the story using the data, and then kind of optimize from there.
Got it. You already touched on this briefly, or you alluded to this system, the what you call the Savage growth system of attention, conversion, delivery, and is it multiplication?
Yep.
Yeah. So tell me in your words, and because I want to break those 4 stages of that cycle down, what exactly does the Savage growth system look like, and how do we implement it?
So in the simplest terms, so you've got attraction. So that's bringing somebody to your business, attracting them. Conversion is making that first sale, turning them into a paying customer. Delivery is making good on your promise, whatever that might be. And then multiplication is upselling them, cross-selling them, getting them to give you referrals, keeping them to stay, keeping them around longer. So that's going to look different in every business. And that's why I like to keep it kind of high level, because those different pieces look different when you're actually in a business. But ultimately, that's kind of the overarching process of how service businesses operate. So as far as actually implementing it, like I said, you've got to look at the numbers and then figure out which of those pieces are lacking, and then kind of address the bottlenecks from there.
So this is the Storytelling Lab, and I know we connected based on storytelling and marketing. And today, so far, we've been talking a lot about looking at the numbers, finding the chinks in the chain, or the chinks in your armor, however you want to say that, and understanding where your weaknesses are, reading data, et cetera, et cetera. And I think storytelling in marketing often gets misconstrued for just communication, external communication. So just talking about your product or your service or your offer, content marketing, social media marketing, et cetera, et cetera. I argue that it is not, that it is an internal system, an external system, an overall, woven through your entire business system. I'm not sure if you agree with that, but my direct question is, what role does storytelling play in marketing beyond just here's how we're going to go post about what we have to offer?
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And kind of alluding to the earlier talk that we had about transformation, that's what your story really should convey. It's not just telling the story of, oh, here's how we were founded. It's relaying the why behind it, and that ultimately plays into all of those steps that we kind of talked about with the Savage growth system, because every step has messaging involved, whether that is a sales conversation or an ad or an upsell conversation or a referral conversation. All of that is pulling off of the story that you tell, and it all has to support each other. So yeah, I would say it's definitely all interconnected. And then if you do have a part of the puzzle that isn't corroborating your core messaging, that's where you start to see things break down, where it's, why can't we keep customers? And it's like, well, you told them one thing here, they thought this was one thing, and now their experience has been totally different. You've got this other person saying this completely different thing. So I think, yeah, aligning your message, aligning your story in a way that makes sense for your customers core to not just marketing, but like you said, those deeper pieces like the operations and customer relationships as well.
Absolutely. I mean, you went right to it. Transformation is key in any story. You really don't have a story. You just have a sequence of events, unless there has been some change that has happened. The previous question, when you were talking about just kind of following the customer journey, speaking of storytelling, this is not a question, but more something to share with you that you may or may not be familiar with. In the early days of Airbnb, they had a project called Project Snow White. Have you heard this story?
I don't think so.
Cool. I think that you'll dig it. And Airbnb, the brand Airbnb is, under question, I would say currently, to at least some of their users. But in the early days, I think they did a great job of disrupting their industry, making a new market, et cetera, et cetera. One of the ways that they did that was they partnered with Pixar storyboard artist, and under this project called Project Snow White, because what Walt Disney did with Snow White, which was the first animated feature film, was literally storyboarded out the whole thing to show to people like this is what it would look like, because they couldn't imagine that long of a story in that format. And so they used the same process, and they basically storyboarded out all the potential customer journeys of both users, the host and the guest, and kind of it allowed them to pinpoint the gaps in their system, where something might have gone wrong, a problem or an obstacle that may have arisen, and therefore kind of solve that problem before they ever encountered it in real life. And so it's one of my favorite examples of like literal storytelling being applied to the overall process and customer journey, in your business or with your product. So check it out if you want to sometime online. I had many years ago, the early days of the podcast, one of those storyboard artists on. So it was really cool to kind of like nerd out and pick his brain about that approach. So I thought that was a cool way to look at it.
Yeah, super interesting.
Absolutely, and a good collaboration between two kind of big brands, Pixar and Airbnb. I want to talk a little bit about metrics. We've already talked about to some degree analyzing data and not just understanding your story and transformation and putting it out there and crossing your fingers and hoping that it resonates, but really like tracking it, right? So metrics is something I think that can be confusing for a lot of people when it comes to marketing, which ones to focus on, which ones matter. Again, my hunch is that you'll probably say it depends on, why you're in business, what the transformation is that you seek to create. But if I could just simplify the question, what are the metrics that matter most and why?
Like you said, it does depend, but I will say that there are certain metrics when you're kind of looking at the overall customer journey, especially in service businesses, that you're kind of always temperature checking to see if they're aligning with where they need to be. So customer acquisition cost is a big one that you're going to want to look at, and that's how much it costs you to get a customer actually paying you. So that's going to tie into your cost per lead and the rate at which you're closing. Other thing that I definitely recommend figuring out is your average deal size, because that's another one that can really make or break a business if you're underselling or you're underpricing your services. Sometimes people are thinking that their average deal size is a lot higher than it actually is. So you've definitely got to average that out and see where you're sitting as far as average deal size goes. Close rate is another huge one. There's, having a bunch of leads is great, but if you're not actually closing them, it's basically worthless. So you want to make sure that your close rate's good. Other thing is referral rate and upsell rate. If you're able to actually make more out of those people that are in your ecosystem already. That's another thing that I always strongly press on, because that gives you a lot more elasticity as far as how much you're able to pay to acquire a customer, because on the back end, you're getting a lot more out of them. So those are some other metrics that I would look at as far as multiplication goes and customer lifetime value.
Yeah, the lifetime value is super important. That's why I often talk about, I mean, it's building a relationship, right? Or that's what you want to do. It's not just a transaction, it's transformative. And so if you do it well, then it can be lifetime value and really cultivate this meaningful relationship with people. When we talk about making deeper connections with your clients, your customers, your communities, how does that actually drive growth? I mean, we're getting there with what we're just talking about. But what I'm pinpointing or picking at is, I think some businesses might think that the marketing, our transformation that we want, et cetera, are like the warm and fuzzies, right? And over here is the stuff that really matters, right? Which I argue that they're two sides of the same coin. It's the intellectual and the emotional. And this, because this is what storytelling is, right? Like, you have the plot, which is the informational or intellectual side. And then, but what we all care about is the emotional journey, right? It's like, that's the, storytelling 101. And so, but I want to dig into how it directly applies, in your opinion, to drive growth when you're saying these things like, building relationships. I know that was my word, but deepening your connection with your people, finding, exactly aligning with the right people, not just leads, right? But the right leads, so to speak. How does it actually drive growth?
Yeah, that's a great question. And to your point, I completely agree. As far as the emotional side of things, I mean, I think it's so overlooked, and that's why a lot of brands struggle, because they're just focused on numbers and they're thinking, how can we get a cheaper lead? And they're not thinking about that other aspect of really talking to that emotional side of people, because everybody makes decisions with at least a little bit of emotion. So you've really got to understand that and speak to it. I couldn't agree more, because that's what ultimately impacts the numbers, the brass tacks. You've got to get that warm and fuzzies, like you said, dialed in. But as far as how relationship building ties into business success, ultimately, in my experience, it's really just doing right by people and driving the value that they're looking for. I think the more you approach business in a transactional way, the more you are really cheapening your brand in the eyes of consumers, because then they're seeing it as a relationship that is transactional, which, if it's transactional, then the second somebody comes along and they have a cheaper product, they're jumping ship. And so building those relationships is really the differentiator, especially in service, because in service, you're dealing with somebody face to face, whether that's somebody that's cleaning your house or somebody that's walking you through an IT strategy. It's that human connection that really makes the big difference. And if we're going to talk about how that impacts numbers and business success, well, that's going to influence retention. That's going to influence your ability to upsell or cross-sell, or get referrals out of people as well. So that's what really impacts that multiplication piece, which ultimately goes down the line of, conversion, delivery, multiplication. Again, it all feeds into each other. But at the core of that, those relationships are what drives that ability to multiply.
I think it also plays a lot into like the longevity of a business or the resiliency. When we're talking earlier about the fitness brand, pivoting in COVID, I think if you don't have these types of relationships built, You also use the word elastic, which I really love.
Mm-hmm.
To have a business that is able to have long-term sustainable success and be resilient for those tough times and be elastic and malleable and evolve with
Mm-hmm.
time, right? These are the important things. So I feel like even if you might have temporary success being very transactional, I think it neglects all of these other things that we're talking about. And you're going to need to be resilient at some point. And if you want a long-term sustainable success, those relationships, I think, are everything. But I do think it's kind of funny, for
Mm-hmm.
lack of a better word, the people who kind of pile that on later, like let's make a great product and then we'll go add this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Then we'll go figure out how to talk about it. And, in my opinion, it's a front load. It's all tied together. It's not necessarily like it has to be done first, but it is done in tandem, I would
Mm-hmm.
argue.
Yeah.
What do you think, what would you say, suggest, advise to a company that's a startup or any kind of small nonprofit, like someone who's really strapped and overwhelmed and under resourced? What advice would you give for them to implement these same approaches, these same systems, when they're really feeling like they're just hanging on for dear life and the runway is just like closing in fast?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is another situation where that customer journey mapping is super helpful, because if you look at the touch points where people are actually interacting with your brand, your team, that's where you can really start to deepen those interactions. But you kind of have to know what those interaction and those touch points even look like before you can start to optimize them. So for example, maybe you've got a marketing agency and somebody comes in, you have the sales call, then you have the onboarding call, then you have the monthly check-in, then you've got, the review call or whatever it is. I would look at what each of those interactions is looking like, and then see if you're able to kind of optimize those. Because, for example, you might have situations where account managers are very transactional, just trying to get off the call, and there's not really any relationship building happening. It's more just, hey, here are your numbers. Okay, bye. I've seen that happen. I've worked in and with marketing agencies, and that does not bode well for that relationship building. But on the flip side, you see those touch points where somebody actually cares. What are you seeing in your business? How does this cost per lead actually translate into success for your business? Because if we say, oh, hey, we got you 100 leads at $5 a pop, that sounds good from a marketing perspective, but the client might be going, oh, well, none of those leads were actually my target market. And a lot of the time, agencies don't really care. And so that just doesn't bode well for the relationship building aspect. So I guess all of that to say, look at how all of those touch points are going and if they're actually serving building those relationships and deepening them, or if they're just kind of filler pieces or even detracting from that relationship.
What's your approach to advertising? Is it the same way you're approaching this when we're talking about building these deeper connections, these relationships with their customers? How do you advise people show up in the ad space with this same system, the same approach?
So I would say overarching idea behind my approach to advertising is what we talked about earlier, which is that transformation. A lot of businesses fall into that trap of speaking to features or even benefits, but not really that transformation, because that's really what resonates with people. And I think that sets that groundwork for having that deep emotional resonance with people too. And that kind of echoes through the rest of their journey because they feel seen, they feel heard. That's where they build that brand loyalty, where they feel like you actually understand them and you're not just trying to sell them something. Sometimes advertising can feel like kind of just shoving your message down people's throat. And that's where you start to see ads that even if you are able to sell your services through them, it doesn't create that long-term loyalty, because going back to what I said earlier, it's transactional. It's that kind of vendor relationship. Whereas if you're able to kind of strike that emotional chord early, it kind of lays that foundation to be able to continue to capitalize on it and continue to deepen that relationship over time.
Is it something that if you do what we are talking about correctly in terms of marketing, is advertising necessary for most people, most businesses rather?
Yeah, so I would definitely say always be advertising, because your marketing strategy should be multi-pronged. I've seen a lot of businesses, especially smaller businesses, kind of rely on just one channel, or they rely on just referrals. And not only is your growth going to be capped by doing that, but also you're putting all your eggs in one basket. I've seen a lot of businesses struggle substantially with an algorithmic change, like Facebook ads having one change and all of a sudden your results just tank. Or companies that rely just on SEO, same thing. You're putting all your faith in this one platform, in this one tactic. And if that doesn't end up performing for whatever reason, especially things out of your control, then you're completely out of luck. So I definitely think advertising plays a big role in that broader marketing strategy. So I would heavily advise advertising in the vast majority of cases, or at least having multiple different marketing levers that you're pulling at any given time.
Well said. What about storytelling coming inward, about feedback loops, about listening to your customers and clients and community versus storytelling? How important is that to this type of system?
Super important. That feedback is what's going to help you refine your messaging, not just from a storytelling perspective, but, well, I guess, yeah, from a storytelling perspective, which is going to then ripple out into your marketing messaging, the emails that you send, those conversations that you have. And typically, if you are looking at those conversations, you're going to see trends that come up in, a sales conversation where somebody says, oh man, I really wish you guys did this. Or, hey, I had this problem with this other agency that I worked with. And so you start to see those things and start to be able to incorporate that into the rest of your messaging. So all that to say, it's super important, whether that's listening to sales conversations or seeing the comments on the ads that you're running online. Those usually tell a story as well. So it's really important, because your messaging and the story that you tell is and should be ever evolving, and it should be heavily influenced by that feedback that you're actually seeing in the marketplace.
Absolutely. For those that are listening that might be interested in learning more or going a little bit deeper, like in the Savage growth system, I know we were talking about, like, it's, we kind of gave the overall view. It depends on that company and that, and the transformation they seek to provide. Where do they start? Whether that's working with you or whether that's something that they can do on their own first.
Yeah, absolutely. So if you would like to work with me and my team, you can go to savagegrowthpartners.com. Otherwise, I have a growth system scorecard that you can actually run through and score yourself on a couple of the big levers within each of those pieces of the growth system, and see where you should start to put in some work first, see where your bottleneck is, and start to adjust from there if you want to kind of start on your own or get a quick feel for where you are currently. And we can put the link to that in the show notes. I can't think of the URL off the top of my head for that one, but that's a good place to start for sure, to kind of self-diagnose.
Yeah, that's a good little tool to use. And what are you focused on as we are coming up to the new year, which is wild to admit? Are you looking to change something in your own business or do something different? Or are you really just trying to dig in and continue to strengthen that foundation that you've built?
Yeah, so definitely strengthening the foundation. Also, speaking to the system side, trying to systemize more stuff even within my own business as we grow and scale and hit new growing pains. Still trying to dial in some systems as that happens. So those are kind of two of the biggest focuses.
Awesome. Well, I appreciate you being here. This is I mean, I have a ton of notes, so I hope the people listening do too, because these episodes where we really dig into, I mean, these are all actionable, tangible takeaways, right? On the show, sometimes we talk about the emotional stuff and the feel good stuff and the top level stuff, and that's important. But I really love these little nuggets of wisdom that people can listen to this episode and immediately go ahead and transfer them into their own systems. And so I appreciate your perspective for that, because it was clear and it helped me as well.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on.
Absolutely. Appreciate you being here. My name is Rain Bennett. Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed that episode, do us a favor and subscribe to the podcast. If you're already a subscriber and you're enjoying the show, give us a review and let us know the value that you've gotten from it. We love to hear from our listeners and learn about the benefits that they're getting from the show. That's what fuels us, and that's what fuels the show. And if you've already subscribed and you've already reviewed it and you think there's someone else that would benefit from listening to this show, please share it with them. The more we grow, the more we can help you grow, and that's what we're here to do. Join us next time on the Storytelling Lab. I actually like the way that last one ended a lot. That's what helps us grow, and that's what helps you grow, and that's what we're here to do. That's cool. I dig that. So